I'm Emily, 32, and I was just the sister standing quietly by the wall. I hoped just this once I might be seen as part of the family, but nothing had changed. I was still invisible to them. They told the photographer no photos with her. Then someone unexpected stepped into the frame. They didn't expect me to come early. That much was obvious. The wedding venue, an old vineyard-turned-boutique event hall, was already bustling with soft jazz playing over the speakers and vendors arranging white roses along the aisle. I stepped out of my car, clutching the invitation I had received just 3 days ago, almost like an afterthought. Linda hadn't called, Chloe hadn't texted, but the envelope had my name on it, handwritten in rushed cursive with no return address. I held it up to the sunlight that morning just to make sure it was real. As I walked in, the woman at the welcome desk gave me a polite nod, then scanned the guest list. "Oh, Emily. Right," she said, pausing before scribbling something next to my name and handing me a plain wristband. "Just head through the back door. The others are setting up near the orchard." The back door. I smiled just slightly. The path to the orchard was lined with white chairs and small chalkboard signs that read things like, "Love grows here." I passed by servers unloading champagne flutes and cousins I hadn't seen in years who barely looked up when I waved. Near the tent, Chloe stood in a white satin robe, her hair in rollers flanked by her bridesmaids in soft pink. She glanced at me, expression unreadable, then turned to Sarah, whispering something before they both looked away. I took my assigned seat, back row on the far left. The folding chair wobbled slightly, one leg sinking into the grass. Nobody said anything, but the silence wrapped around me like a curtain. A few minutes later, I stood to grab a bottle of water from the refreshment table, only to hear Mom's voice behind me, not quiet enough. "She shouldn't be in the photos. It'll ruin the symmetry." Chloe responded with a laugh. "We'll just take family shots. Real family." I stopped walking. Did she mean that? Did they all agree? I turned slowly, keeping my face calm. They weren't even looking at me, just adjusting veils and giggling about whether the rain would hold off. The photographer arrived, then a young woman with a clipboard and a thick camera strap slung over her shoulder. Linda walked up to her, pointing toward the grove. "We'll do group photos over there. Start with immediate family only. No extras." Extras. I sat down again. A bee hovered over my wrist, then flew off. My dress, sky blue soft cotton, suddenly felt too bright, too noticeable. I tucked the hem beneath my thighs and folded my hands in my lap. I didn't say anything. Not to Mom. Not to Chloe. Not even to Sarah when she passed by and offered me a hesitant smile. I just smiled back. People think silence means defeat, but sometimes it's the only space where dignity can breathe, and I intended to give it room. I stayed seated through the bridal party photos, watching from a distance as they arranged themselves in curated clusters of affection. Sarah kept looking over her shoulder, maybe checking if I was still there. She was the only one who didn't completely avert her eyes. The photographer called for the siblings-only shot. Chloe waved Linda over and said something while pointing in my direction. My mother tilted her head, clearly hesitant. Then she simply shook her head. I couldn't hear what she said, but her hand gesture said enough. Low, quick, final. They all lined up beside a white wooden arbor, Chloe in the center, her arm hooked through Sarah's, laughing. I imagined where I might have stood if the day had gone differently. Maybe between Chloe and Sarah, if we still had the kind of relationship that held space for me. But instead, I watched from the side next to the table, holding spare programs and a box of bug spray wipes. A little girl, maybe 6, ran past me in a poofy dress, then stopped, pointing at my chair. "Why are you sitting way over here?" I smiled softly. "Just keeping the breeze company." She looked confused for a second, then her mom called her back before she could ask more. By the time the rehearsal wrapped up, people started to disperse. Someone cranked up a speaker playing Norah Jones. Staff wheeled in platters of tiny crab cakes and toothpicked Capri's bites. I wandered slowly past the snack tables, then paused when I heard Mom's voice again, this time quieter, sharper. She showed up early. I thought the invite was clear. "I sent it," Chloe said flatly. "I had to. Grandpa would have noticed. She doesn't belong in the portraits. Let's just hope she doesn't cause a scene." "She won't." Chloe's voice had that same practiced calm she used in high school debates. She never does. And she was right. I didn't. I took one crab cake, a napkin, and walked toward the edge of the vineyard where the rows of vines framed the setting sun. From there, I could see the whole set-up rows of chairs now being straightened for the ceremony, fairy lights overhead starting to flicker on. Sarah approached a few minutes later. She had taken off her heels and was holding them in one hand, stepping barefoot on the dry grass. "Hey," she said gently. "You look nice. That color suits you. Thanks." I smiled, a real one this time. "You look bridal adjacent." She chuckled. "That's the goal. Maid of honor has to hover somewhere between best friend and background." We stood quietly for a while. "I'm sorry about earlier," she added. "I didn't know what Chloe and your mom had planned." "It's fine," I replied. "I didn't come for the photos." That seemed to catch her off guard. She looked at me again, a little more carefully this time. "Then why did you come?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I watched a ladybug crawl along the edge of the wine barrel next to us. Eventually, Sarah whispered, "Grandpa's asking for you. He's in the cottage. They have him resting before the ceremony." I nodded, brushing invisible dust from my skirt, and made my way up the gravel path to the guest cottage at the top of the hill. The door creaked softly as I entered. Grandpa was sitting near the window in a dark green armchair staring out at the vineyard. His suit jacket was folded neatly over the back of the chair, and he was holding an old wooden cane loosely in one hand. He turned slightly when he heard me. "Well?" he said, smiling faintly. "I thought you'd come." I almost didn't. "But you did." "That's the thing." He motioned to the seat across from him. "Sit." I did. The room smelled like cedar and old paper. Grandpa didn't ask questions. He didn't mention Chloe or Linda. He just sat with me as if silence was enough. And for the first time that day, it was. I stayed with Grandpa until the sunlight outside turned a deeper gold, casting long shadows through the sheer curtains. He didn't say much, he never had to, but every now and then he would glance at me like he was measuring something invisible. When I finally stood up, he didn't stop me. He just said, "Don't let anyone shrink you, Emily. They'll try, but you get to choose your shape." I nodded and walked out quietly, closing the door behind me. The ceremony was about to begin. Guests were settling into their seats, the string quartet tuning softly under the oak tree. Chloe stood off to the side with Linda fluffing the layers of her gown. She looked radiant in the curated Instagram-ready way. A photographer circled nearby, adjusting settings on his camera. As I approached the seating area, a woman I didn't recognize intercepted me, probably an event coordinator. She glanced at her clipboard, then at me. "Hi, sorry, family seating is up front," she said, then quickly added, "Actually, wait, could you check in with the maid of honor first?" I smiled politely. "That's okay, I'll just stand in the back." The woman looked relieved and stepped aside. I found a spot beneath a tree at the edge of the aisle. From there, I could see everything, the rows of white chairs, Chloe holding her bouquet just a little too tightly, Sarah adjusting the veil one last time. Then Linda walked past me. She didn't stop, didn't look at me. But as she passed, she said under her breath, "No photos with the family, okay? Let's not confuse things." Her heels clicked on the flagstone, sharp as punctuation. I didn't respond. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I stepped back one more foot, letting a patch of sun catch the hem of my dress. It shimmered for a moment, soft, unannounced. Then the music began. The crowd stood. The ceremony was starting. From where I stood, no one noticed me. And that was fine. Because I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to remember. The ceremony passed in a blur of soft vows and practiced smiles. Chloe's voice only trembled once when she said forever, and even then Sarah quickly squeezed her hand, steadying the moment. People clapped, the string quartet soared, and I clapped too from the back. Quietly. After the kiss and the recessional, the guests began drifting toward the reception tent. I waited, letting the crowd thin. No one noticed I was still there. When I finally made my way to the tent, the seating chart stood on a gold easel near the entrance. It was beautifully calligraphed, surrounded by baby's breath and eucalyptus. I scanned it quickly, looking for my name, not really expecting to find it, but still I looked. I wasn't listed. Instead, there was a reserved Overflow table at the very back corner. No names, just a white tent card that read Guests of the Bride. I didn't say anything. I just walked there, pulled out a chair, and sat. The table was near the buffet, close to where the staff bustled in and out with trays. The music from the tent barely reached this far, muffled under the fabric. My seat wobbled slightly. The linen had a faint coffee stain. After a while, the clinking of glasses signaled the toasts. I watched from afar. Linda took the mic first, glowing proud. She spoke of Chloe's grace, her journey, her elegance. She didn't mention me, not even a passing word, like our daughters or both of my girls. Then Sarah stood and told a story about Chloe sneaking out to a party in high school and Linda covering for her. Everyone laughed, even Grandpa. I didn't. I folded my hands in my lap. When dinner was served, a server came by with plates. As he approached, he paused, confused, then said, "Oh, sorry. I think this table is just overflow. They didn't put full service out here." He started to walk away. I gently touched his sleeve. "Could I get just a glass of water, please?" He nodded, embarrassed, and disappeared. A few minutes later he returned with a glass, no ice. Nearby, two cousins waved at me awkwardly, then turned back to their conversation. Linda passed once on her way to the head table. She didn't stop, but she noticed me. Her expression didn't shift, still poised, polite. She might have been looking at a centerpiece. Chloe, meanwhile, looked happy. She was surrounded by bridesmaids, old friends from college, and extended family who'd flown in. Her dress sparkled under the fairy lights. She looked like the centerpiece of a perfect wedding, which I suppose she was. Then came the family photo call. A photographer, young and brisk, called out names. Parents of the bride, siblings, grandparents, people shuffled into place. Sarah pulled Linda into the group. Grandpa walked over with his cane steady. Chloe waved at someone off to the side. Then the photographer hesitated and looked around. Any other siblings? Chloe answered quickly but lightly. "No, that's everyone." The photographer nodded, adjusted his lens. I didn't move. But Sarah did look at me, just a flicker of an eye, barely a breath, and then looked away. I watched as they posed one perfect smile after another. The shutter clicked like a clock ticking out a version of the family I wasn't in. The group dispersed after the photos, the chatter folding back into the tent's golden warmth. I stayed seated, still sipping from my lukewarm water. The glass was nearly empty, but I didn't ask for more. Dinner went on without me. I could smell roasted chicken and rosemary rolls. The clatter of silverware and clinking of wine glasses reached me like a soundtrack I hadn't been invited to join. At one point, Chloe came out of the tent adjusting her dress. She was alone. For a brief moment, she looked my way. Her eyes met mine. Then she looked past me like she'd just remembered something she forgot inside. And she was gone. A few minutes later, Linda followed, holding a small plate with half a piece of cake. She didn't speak, just walked by and dropped the plate gently on the corner of my table. "It's lemon," she said without looking at me. I stared at the plate. The frosting had smudged along the rim. I didn't eat it. Later, a slow song began. The tent lights dimmed and people moved to the dance floor. Grandpa, surprisingly nimble for his age, took Sarah's hand and danced. They laughed together. The scene was soft, warm, joyful. A photographer passed by again and took a photo of their dance. Then I saw Linda whisper something to the DJ. A few seconds later, the music softened and the DJ's voice rang out cheerful and clear. "Let's get the whole family out here for a picture with the bride and groom." I saw Grandpa pause mid-step. Sarah blinked. Linda looked at me, then turned away again. I didn't stand. People moved in waves toward the dance floor, gathering behind the couple. One of Chloe's college friends, someone who probably didn't even know my name, said to another, "She's not part of the close family, right?" Her voice wasn't harsh, just matter of fact, and loud enough. The other girl nodded. "Yeah, I think she's like the cousin or something." They kept walking. I stayed seated. My fingers found the edge of the tablecloth. I straightened it, smoothed the crease near the coffee stain. Someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. It was Sarah. "Hey," she said, a little breathless. I just wanted to check in. Are you okay?" I smiled. "I'm fine." "You sure?" she asked, hesitant now. I thought maybe It's Chloe's day," I said. "She looks beautiful." Sarah opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, but then nodded. "Yeah? Yeah, she does." Then she returned to the dance floor. Back inside the tent, they called for toasts again. Chloe and her husband stood near the cake. Linda raised her glass. "To my daughter," she said, voice strong. "You make us proud every day. You've always been the light in every room." Someone clinked a glass. The groom kissed her cheek. No one mentioned me. No one asked if I wanted to say something. A part of me wondered what would happen if I just stood up and walked into that tent, raised my voice, and demanded to be seen. But I didn't. I just sat back. Let them write their version of the day. Let them frame the photos. Let them speak their toasts. But still in the corner of the tent, behind the bustle and the laughter, Grandpa glanced over. His eyes didn't linger, but I saw it. A flicker. A pause. Something unsaid. And that, strangely, was enough to keep me still. As the night deepened, the laughter inside the tent grew louder. I could hear the clink of forks tapping on glasses, followed by more cheers and a chorus of "kiss kiss" that echoed like a tradition I was never part of. From my corner, I caught glimpses of the family table. Linda was seated right in the middle, flanked by Chloe and her new husband. Their silhouettes, framed by the soft lighting, looked like a magazine spread the perfect wedding, the perfect daughter, the perfect legacy. Then I saw it. The family slideshow started playing on the white canvas behind them, a montage of Chloe's childhood, growing up, school recitals, birthdays, and family vacations. I expected it. But somehow the pang still hit when photo after photo rolled by and my face was missing. Not just absent, erased. One photo in particular caught me off guard. A Christmas shot from years ago. I remembered it well. I had been there. I even took that photo, but in the version on screen it had been cropped. The frame cut off just to the left of Chloe, right where I had been kneeling by the tree. My breath caught, not because it hurt anymore, but because it confirmed something deeper. They wanted me edited out, not forgotten by accident, but erased with intention. A server passed by with a tray of flutes. He paused, unsure. "Would you like?" "No, thank you," I said gently. He nodded and moved on. Someone else joined me unexpectedly, an older man I didn't recognize at first. He wore a gray blazer and a boutonniere that matched the wedding palette. His hands were weathered, his voice kind. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I nodded. He didn't introduce himself, just sat quietly for a moment before speaking again. "You Chloe's sister?" I glanced at him. "Yes." "She's lucky," he said, "to have someone who knows how to take a back seat. Not many can do that without making a fuss." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a veiled jab. He chuckled softly. "But sometimes people forget that the quiet ones are the ones watching the closest." Then he stood, tipped his head, and walked back into the light. That night, as the cake was served and the music shifted to louder tracks, I stayed seated, my hands folded in my lap. The final toast was called, and Linda stood again. Her voice rang with conviction. "To Chloe, my pride, and to the family who's always been by her side." My glass stayed on the table. I looked across the lawn, past the fairy lights and the dance floor, to the far end, where Grandpa sat alone, a half-full glass of water in front of him. He wasn't clapping, just looking, not at the couple, at me. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. But something in his stillness reached me like a held breath. Sarah caught my eye as she returned to the tent. Her face said everything and nothing. She gave me a tight, almost guilty smile before disappearing again. I stood, stretched my legs, and slowly walked toward the edge of the property. Not away, just far enough to breathe. Behind me the music swelled. Someone called for a group photo again. No one stopped me. No one called me back. But I didn't feel gone. I just felt waiting. And for the first time that evening, I knew I wasn't the one who should feel out of place. The group photo session was in full swing when I heard Linda's voice cut through the chatter like a director calling for a scene. "All right, let's get the immediate family first." Guests started forming ranks in front of the floral arch, the photographer adjusting his lens and barking short commands. Chloe stood in the middle, radiant in her gown, her groom beside her. Linda took her place with practiced ease, gesturing for Sarah to join. One cousin, then another. A few aunts and uncles filtered in. I stood at a distance watching the order of things. Then Linda's voice again, louder, a little sharper. "Let's just keep it clean. No photos with extended family right now." I felt eyes flicker toward me, not from malice, just the casual way people look past something that's always been in the background. I stayed where I was under the hanging lights next to the empty punch table. My hands rested in front of me, fingers looped together so they wouldn't tremble. A few feet away, Sarah hesitated. She looked at me, really looked. But before she could step forward, Chloe leaned in, whispering something into Linda's ear. Both glanced my way. Linda's response was immediate, a dismissive wave, the kind you'd use on a gnat, too annoying to swat. I turned slightly, not to leave, just to look away. Then came the twist of air. A chair scraped, footsteps, and then a voice. "Emily." I looked up. Grandpa was walking toward me, steady despite his cane. His suit slightly askew, but his spine was straight as ever. He stopped beside me, not in front, not across, beside. His hand brushed my arm, not to guide me, not to pull me, just a touch grounding and deliberate. "Your family, and I think they need to see that." It wasn't loud, but it carried. People turned. The photographer hesitated, camera still lifted. Linda's smile faltered. Chloe's brow furrowed. Grandpa adjusted his jacket and looked straight ahead. "If Emily's not in it," he said plainly, "I won't be either." Silence. A beat. Then the photographer cleared his throat. Should we? I'll wait," Grandpa said, and his tone was final. Not angry, not confrontational, just complete. And in that stillness, something shifted. No one moved at first. The photographer lowered his camera, glancing around for cues. Linda opened her mouth as if to protest, but the words never came. Chloe's fingers tightened around her bouquet, the white petals crinkling slightly. Sarah, standing awkwardly between two cousins, looked from Grandpa to me and then stepped aside, making a space. Grandpa remained unmoving. His stillness was weighty like an anchor. And then, like dominoes, people adjusted. A cousin stepped back. One uncle gestured toward me. It was as if the very shape of the gathering reconfigured itself in real time, silently acknowledging a truth that had long been ignored. I didn't say anything. I just walked forward. One step, then another. When I reached Grandpa's side, he didn't look at me. He simply nodded once, almost imperceptibly. His eyes faced forward where the camera was now raised again, awaiting. Linda forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. "Well, if you insist, Dad?" Chloe said nothing. I stood slightly to the side, not centered, not imposing, just present. I folded my hands in front of me again, this time steady. The shutter clicked. Once, twice, then a rapid burst. I wasn't smiling, but I wasn't shrinking either. When the session ended, people started to drift, some toward the buffet, some toward the bar. Chloe disappeared into a circle of bridesmaids. Linda followed her quickly, clutching her wine glass too tightly. Grandpa remained beside me, breathing calm and even. Then, without a word, he turned and began walking toward the garden path behind the tent. I followed. We reached a bench near the rose trellis. He sat slowly, wincing a little. I stood, not sure if he wanted company or space. "You were never invisible," he said, eyes still on the petals. I didn't answer right away. I know what they've made you feel. Like being quiet meant being lesser. It doesn't. I looked at the ground. "You've held more grace in silence than some do with a microphone." I sat down beside him then, and for a while we just listened to the rustling leaves, the laughter from afar, the faint clinking of glasses. It was enough. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket, an old photo, worn edges, slight crease. Me at 6 on his lap, holding a crayon drawing of a crooked house. "You gave me this when you thought no one else would care," he said. But I did. I took the photo, fingers brushing the faded paper. That's when I realized this wasn't about being in the picture. It was about being seen, truly seen, even when others had chosen to look away. We stayed there until the music from the reception softened into the distance. No big scene. No shouting match. Just a moment reclaimed. And I was ready for what came next. Later that evening, the sky had deepened into a soft indigo, and the last notes of the wedding music were beginning to fade. I wandered back toward the main tent, not out of obligation, just to say goodbye. I passed by the dessert table. A few half-eaten slices of cake sat untouched, the frosting smudged, small forks abandoned like afterthoughts. Someone had knocked over a flute of champagne. It dripped slowly onto the grass, unnoticed. I spotted Sarah by the side, holding her shoes in one hand. She gave me a look, not pity, not surprise, just recognition. She nodded once, and I returned it. No words. Near the exit, Chloe was posing again for another photo, this time with her college friends. Her laugh was high but strained. When she caught sight of me in the corner of her eye, her smile faltered just slightly, then she turned back, overcompensating with a louder laugh. I didn't stop to say goodbye to her. Instead, I walked to where the valet was stationed. The line had shortened. I handed over my ticket, and the young man jogged off. Then I heard footsteps behind me. "Wait," a voice said. I turned. Linda. She stood there holding a small white envelope, the kind used for gift cards or folded checks. This was returned to the table. "I assume it was yours," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I said calmly, "I left what I thought was appropriate." Her hand trembled slightly. "You didn't have to make a scene," she said. I tilted my head, not unkindly. "I didn't." The valet returned with my car. I stepped toward it, opening the door, then paused. For a brief moment I looked back, not to plead, not to argue, but simply to let them see me as I was. Not the invisible guest, not the forgotten sister, but someone who had quietly reclaimed her own name. Linda still stood, frozen envelope in hand. As I slipped into the driver's seat, I saw Grandpa watching from the far edge of the tent. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, but he raised his glass slightly, a quiet salute. I returned it with a small nod. The engine hummed to life. The headlights swept across the lawn, catching bits of lace and ribbons scattered like memories. I drove slowly down the gravel path, the crunch of stone beneath the tires, oddly soothing. As I passed the front gates, the world seemed to exhale. There was no applause, no dramatic confrontation, no sudden declaration of truth. Just a quiet shift, as if the scales had finally balanced. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. They would talk, of course, maybe even rewrite what had happened, but I had nothing more to prove. I had shown up, I had stood still, and someone had stood beside me. That was enough. I turned onto the main road, headlights stretching forward into the night. And behind me, the wedding continued, but I wasn't part of it anymore. Not because I wasn't invited, but because I had already left something far heavier behind. Some moments don't need an audience. Some truths don't need to be shouted. Sometimes all it takes is one step forward, quiet, steady, for everything to shift. And when it does, the ones who once looked through you finally see. Not because you asked them to, but because you no longer need them to.